In this video, I'm going to go over some examples on how we can create prompts for our C# console applications. Now, a prompt in a C# console application is a way of interacting with the user in order to help the user know what kind of inputs to give our program and how to read in those inputs. Now, a good prompt is going to have three components. A good prompt is going to have an output, which is going to tell the user what to enter. Then a prompt will have an input. It will read in the user's result. And then the last thing we want to do is make sure that we store that user's result into a variable so that our program has access to it later on. So if we build a prompt that has each of these three components, it should be a good prompt. Now, with the output, we're going to use two methods to create our outputs. We can use the write method or the write line method. And in a previous video, we talked about how the write line method is just the write method where we add a new line character at the end. Alright, for inputs, we are going to use the read line method. The read line method is going to pause the console, wait for the user to input some data, and then return the user's input as a string value. And then the last thing we will do is store the result into a variable. So what I'm going to do is try to walk through 5 examples of building prompts, and hopefully it will help make the whole process clearer. First, let's prompt for string data. So because the readline method always returns values as string, this is the easiest prompt to create. So for example, what if we want to prompt the user to enter their name? Okay, so let's prompt the user to enter their name. Now the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to try to come up with a pattern, a process of how to build a good prompt. So I'm going to create a variable that holds a string value named name. This is ultimately where I want to dump the user input. Next, I'm going to have an output statement. So I'm going to say console.writeLine, please enter your name. That is my output statement. I'm telling the user what to enter before I try to read the result back in. After I have told the user what to enter, I'm going to call the console.readLine method to read in the result. But the readLine method returns a string value. So if I want to save that string value, I need to have a variable on the left-hand side to store the result. So I've created a variable to hold the user input, told the user what to enter, read it in, and saved it. So we're doing our 3 steps here. Now, to verify we have the user input, let's echo what the user wrote. So I'm going to say console.writeLine, you entered, and we will insert the entered value, name. Let's run this and check it out. Now the first thing I'm doing is I created the variable. Now I have a print statement. Please enter your name. When on line 22, when I call the console.readLine method, I get a blinking cursor. This is informing the user it's their turn. And because we have an output statement, the user kind of has a clue on what to enter. So maybe they would say, my name is Bob. The readLine method allows the user to enter as many characters as they want until they hit enter. Once they hit enter, all of the characters that the user typed is packaged as a string value and then returned. And we have a name variable to hold the result. Okay? And then when we print out the result, we see that our program is holding on and using the data that the user entered. All right. Now, when I created this prompt, I used write lines, and notice that because I used a write line, after I printed please enter your name, the write line method provided a new line character. So when the user started typing on the read line method, they were typing on the next line. Let's change this write line, this first write line, to a write statement and rerun our program. Please enter your name. Notice when we use a write statement that we do not have the new line being printed by default. So when the user enters their name, they can enter it on the same line as our prompt text. I think this gives a little bit cleaner prompt. Now, to create this space between the colon and the user input, I had to put that space character into my output prompt text right here. Okay, so all the if you use the write statement, you have to add all the formatting that you want when you're printing out. All right, let's do another example. Let's create a prompt for integer data. Now, integer data is a little more complex. Because I want the user to enter in a number value, I'm going to create an integer variable to hold the result. But the readline method only returns a string. So when I want numeric values from the user, I am going to have to do a conversion between the strings characters that the user typed and I have to convert those string characters into the number data type, the number representation. If I don't do this conversion, I can't use the input for doing algebra, for example. So let's walk through an example of doing this. So let's prompt for an age value. Prompt the user to enter their age. Now I'm ultimately going to have a variable that I want to store the user's result, integer age, int age. But I'm also going to make a temporary variable, which is a string variable, and I'm going to call this sAge for the string version of the age. Okay, now I'm going to start my prompt. I'm going to have my output, console.write, please enter your age. I'm going to use the write command so that the user types immediately after my prompt text, and I made sure to add a space after my colon here. And now I'm going to call console.readline to read in the user's response. And then I would like to store this result, but I can't store it into my integer variable because readline only returns a string. So I have to store it into my string version of the age. Okay, if I tried to stick it in my integer version, I'm going to get an error, and that error is going to tell me I cannot implicitly convert type string to int. So C# can't do this conversion. We will have to do it explicitly. So here's my string age variable, and then what I will do is I will do a conversion using the parse method. So here I'm going to convert the string representation to an integer representation using the int.parse method. The way the int.parse method works is, let me type it out and then I will walk through it. The way the parse method works is it takes a string representation of a number as an input value. So we put the string representation between the parentheses. The int.parse method will then return the numeric representation of the number. So for example, if I were using int.parse and passing in the string value 44, what is going to be returned is the integer version 44. Okay, there's a difference between the string representation and the integer value. So all parse does is converts the data type of a string number into its actual number value. Okay, so it's a little more complex, a little more steps here, and then we can echo the results. Console.writeLine, you entered age. Now I'm going to print the integer value, so let's see what we get here. We get past our Bob prompt. Here's our age. If we say our age is 24, and we got the value 24. Now I'm going to show you a little bit of shorthand on building these prompts. I can skip the whole part where I temporarily save the string representation here. So I'm using this string variable only long enough to hold the read line and then pass it into the int.parse method. But what I could do instead is just take this console.readline method and call it from the int.parse. Then I'm going to prompt the user for input, go ahead and parse it into its int representation and save the result. So let me show you what this kind of shorter syntax looks like. So this will be an int prompt using condensed syntax. Here I will make a variable called age2, a new variable. I'm going to have my write statement, console.write. Please enter your age. And then we're going to read in, let me type it out first. I'll put some spaces here to make it a little bit clearer to see. Okay, now this prompt has 3 steps, kind of more in line with our first string prompt here. It has a variable that we're going to save the user's response into, an output statement, and then a read statement which stores the result. Here I have a variable that's going to store the user's input, an output statement that tells the user what to enter, and then a read statement that is going to be parsed into the numeric data type and then stored. So here we are just doing 2 steps in one. And we'll go ahead and, I should change this variable to age2. And we will echo out age2. Just to make sure that this condensed syntax works the same as this expanded syntax. All right. So again, we will be Bob, we'll be 24, and our second prompt works exactly the same way. The only difference is I didn't temporarily save the string value to a string variable before parsing it. Okay. Let's do one last set of examples with doubles. A double prompt, when you prompt for a double value like GPA or salary, for example, again, the user is going to type in number characters, but we have to convert that numeric string into the actual numeric data type. So we're going to need to do a parse again. So let's do an example here. Prompt the user for, how about their GPA, which is a double value. So first I'm going to do it using the the long way. I'm going to use a temporary string variable. So start it off with, I'm going to create a double variable that's ultimately going to hold the user's GPA. Then I'm going to make a string variable that I call sGPA, which will temporarily hold the string user input. Now comes the output statement, console.write. Please enter your GPA. And then finally the read statement. Now, when I call console.readline, console.readline always returns a string value. So I have to save the result into a string variable. So here we save the user's response as string. And now I need to convert it. So I'm going to say GPA is equal to double.parse. I use int.parse when I want to convert a string representation into an integer. I use double.parse when I want to convert a double string representation into a double. So for example, the way double.parse works is I call double.parse. Perhaps the user entered the value 3.99 as characters, as string. Double.parse is going to return the double value 3.99, the number 3.99. Here we have the string characters 3.99 going in, and we have the number 3.99 coming out. So I'm parsing the string representation of the user input and getting the numeric representation. So we'll print the results. So you entered GPA. And before we test this, I'm going to go ahead and show us the condensed version, condensed syntax. Here we're going to create a variable called the GPA2. Now I'm going to have my output statement, console.write. Please enter your GPA. And then I'm going to say GPA2 is equal to double.parse. and I'm going to pass the console.readline method into my double.parse method. So with 3 lines here, create a place to hold the user's input, tell the user what to enter, read in the user's response, parse it into the correct data type, save the result. We'll echo it and then just show that they are all working. So here we are printing GPA2. So Bob has an age 24. Both syntaxes work. He has a GPA of 3.5, and both syntaxes work. Now the last thing I'm going to say about these prompts is that when we use the parse method, this type of prompt is unprotected against bad user input. What do I mean by that? I mean, let's say Bob goes ahead and enters an age of kitten. Now kitten is not a value. If I go up to my prompts here, kitten is not a value that I can parse. Where is my integer prompt? Enter your age. Right here. Kitten is not a value that I can parse into a number. I can't parse kitten into any integer value. Therefore, if I cannot parse the user input value into the data type that I'm trying, we are going to get something called an exception thrown, which will crash our program. So when I run my program here, my program crashes and I get something called a system.format exception. So for right now, we're just going to roll with this. But in a couple videos, we are going to learn how we can protect these prompts against bad inputs. All right? So hopefully with these examples, you can now create any type of prompt, whether you are prompting for string values or numeric values.